Omaha Beach, a concrete bunker facing the channel. Inside, a German gunner oils the barrel of his MG-42. The air smells of salt and steel. In his pocket, one letter, a promise from a girl in Metzingen.
Ich warte bis zum siegreichen Ende.
His officers had told him the Atlantic Wall was unbreakable. Rommel himself had stood here, traced the crossing fields of fire. When they come, this beach will be their cemetery. But out there tonight, the sea is calm. No engines, no lights, only wind, tide, and the click of a bolt sliding home. By the end of this day, the bunker will be knee-deep in spent brass, the barrel warped from heat, and the math of war will overrule belief. This is D-Day, seen from the wrong side of the gun sight.
Keep the barrel clean, short bursts, conserve belts. She said she will wait. When they come. If they come.
They called it the Atlantic Wall. 2,400 kilometers of bunkers, trenches, and gun positions. 17 million cubic meters of concrete, 1.2 million tons of steel. At Omaha alone, 8 concrete bunkers, 35 pillboxes, 18 anti-tank guns, 85 machine gun nests, and 3,700 obstacles in the surf. Gates, hedgehogs, stakes tipped with mines. It was meant to be impregnable. Rommel demanded 60 million mines. In reality, only 6.5 million were laid, barely a tenth of his vision. Too few men, too little time, too many miles of coast. Still, to the soldiers stationed here, it looked invincible. The overlapping fields of fire, the belts of obstacles, the slogans painted on bunker walls, propaganda declared, "This wall will throw the Allies back into the sea." From the inside, it felt like certainty. From the outside, it was illusion waiting to be shattered. German meteorologists promised the storm would last. Winds at 20 knots, seas too rough, clouds too low. For at least 2 weeks, no invasion could come. Confident, generals left their posts. War games in Rennes, patrols canceled. And Rommel himself boarded a train for Germany, bringing a birthday gift for his wife instead of preparing for battle. But the Allies had eyes the Germans could not imagine. Weather stations in Greenland, reconnaissance flights over the Atlantic, hidden data that revealed a single break in the storm. A 36-hour window. Eisenhower studied the map in silence. To delay meant months of waiting. To act meant the greatest gamble of the war. He whispered one word, a decision that would decide the fate of Europe. At 23:15, German radar lit up with massive formations, approaching from the north. To the operators, it was routine. Allied feints had come before. Another false alarm, they thought. But after midnight, reports flooded in. Paratroopers. Everywhere. Some said east of Caen, others west of Carentan. Some shouted British, others swore American. Nothing made sense. Among the falling shadows were real airborne troops. 82nd, 101st, 6th Airborne marking flanks and seizing bridges. But also dummies, Rupert dolls stuffed with straw, fitted with firecrackers. From the ground, they looked like soldiers. From the air, they sounded like gunfire. Command lines jammed with contradiction. Orders stalled. Every minute of hesitation gave the Allies time. Major Hans von Luck, roused from sleep, asked for permission to counterattack. The answer from headquarters was paralyzing. Do not move until the situation clarifies. Von Luck would later write, "At that moment, I knew we were lost." At 5:30, the gray light of dawn revealed what no German soldier had ever imagined. From horizon to horizon, the channel was carpeted with ships. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. The official count, 6,939 vessels, 1,213 warships, 4,126 landing craft, 736 auxiliary ships, 864 marchand vaisselles. It was the largest armada in human history. To the defenders raised on propaganda of Allied weakness, the sight was crushing. One artillery officer at WN-62 whispered to his men,
The whole world is coming.
5 minutes later, at 5:35, the bombardment began. The battleship USS Texas alone hurled 255 14-inch shells. At Pointe du Hoc, in just over half an hour, HMS Warspite, veteran of Jutland, opened fire at 5 and would send more than 300 15-inch shells ashore in the days ahead. Bunkers designed to withstand anything cracked like plaster. Men were buried alive, dug out, and buried again. The thunder of naval guns drowned every other sound. To the soldiers inside the Atlantic Wall, the illusion of invincibility crumbled. With the concrete above their heads, the naval guns struck like sledgehammers. USS Texas alone unleashed 255 14-inch shells at Pointe du Hoc in just 34 minutes. HMS Warspite, a veteran of Jutland, fired more than 300 15-inch rounds in 2 days. Each blast shook the earth like an earthquake. Concrete bunkers designed to withstand anything split apart. Soldiers were buried alive, dug out, and buried again as the shelling rolled on. To the defenders, the psychological weight was as crushing as the stone above their heads. The wall they had trusted cracked and crumbled with every hit. The noise was beyond hearing shockwaves that flattened lungs, dust that blinded eyes, and above them, silence. The Luftwaffe, once promised to darken the skies, mustered only 319 sorties that day. Against them, the Allies launched 14,674. The imbalance was absolute. In the morning, just 2 Focke-Wulf, 190 seconds, Priller and Water Chick swept low over Sword Beach, strafing, once before, vanishing into the sky. 2 fighters against thousands of ships, tens of thousands of men, and the weight of the arsenal of democracy. That single pass became a symbol not of courage, but of impotence. The Knights of the Air, reduced to a fleeting gesture, while the thunder of naval guns continued to grind the Atlantic wall into dust. At 6:30, the first assault waves reached the sand. At WN-62, German machine gunner Heinrich Severloh opened fire at 6:35. For 9 hours, he fed belt after belt into his MG-42 13,500 rounds in all. The barrel warped from heat, glowing red, but the gun kept spitting fire. Through his sights, the beach looked like slaughter. Landing craft burned. Men stumbled and fell in the surf. Yet the math of war did not favor him. For every craft destroyed, 3 more arrived. Every gap on the beach filled instantly with fresh soldiers. By midday, German ammunition calculations collapsed. What had been rationed for a 3-day defense vanished within hours. Machine gunners screamed for more belts. Artillery batteries rationed to 4 shells per gun per day fell silent. Supply lines bombed, strafed, cut by the resistance, never delivered. The illusion of balance dissolved. Historians would later call it material shock, the mental breakdown that comes from facing overwhelming force. No matter how many fell, more came. No matter how hard the trigger was pulled, the tide rose higher. Courage and accuracy meant nothing against unlimited replacements. Inside the bunkers, soldiers realized they weren't fighting men anymore. They were fighting arithmetic and losing. At Utah Beach, a mistake became fortune. The landing drifted 1.8 kilometers east, straight into a weakly defended sector. 21,000 men came ashore by day's end. Fewer than 200 became casualties. Utah was secure before noon. At Omaha, the story was blood. Naval bombardment fell short, missing key defenses. Many Sherman DD tanks sank in rough seas. Engineers waded forward under machine gun fire, clearing obstacles with explosives, dying one after another. By midday, narrow lanes were carved in blood and steel, opening the beachhead at a cost the survivors would never forget. At Pointe du Hoc, the mission bordered on impossible. Rangers in small boats clawed toward cliffs 30 meters high, waves battering their craft. Grappling hooks fired, ropes swung. Hands slipped, voices shouted, "Up, up." Somehow, they scaled the rock and destroyed 5 155mm guns, hidden in orchards. Mission complete, but cut off for 48 hours. They fought alone, surrounded, until relief arrived. 3 points of attack, 3 stories of chance, sacrifice, and endurance. Together, they cracked open Hitler's Atlantic Wall. By noon on June 6th, the German command chain was unraveling. Allied bombers cut telephone lines. French resistance destroyed relay stations. Radios fell silent under jamming. Entire divisions disappeared from the network. Unit commanders were left making decisions in the dark. Isolated, blind, paralyzed. Only one armored division was close enough to respond. The 21st Panzer. But orders came late, 10 a.m., 4 hours after the landings. At 16:20, the division finally moved. By 19, its spearheads touched the coast. For a moment, German armor seemed ready to hurl the Allies back into the sea. Then, the sky darkened with wings. Operation Mallard. 250 gliders, Horsa and Waco, swept overhead, delivering British reinforcements by the thousands. To the men of Panzer 21, it felt like the sky itself was opening. Fearing their flanks were being cut off, the division pulled back. In the retreat, they lost 54 tanks and armored vehicles, nearly a quarter of their strength in a single night. The chance to throw the Allies into the water had come and gone. What remained was a realization. Every German counterblow would be met not just with resistance, but with overwhelming reinforcement from the air, sea, and land. German paratroop commander Friedrich von der Heide would later admit, "We dropped battalions, they dropped divisions." Allied airborne power came not in scattered units, but in waves of C-47 seconds, towing endless gliders. Out of each glider rolled guns, jeeps, men, entire formations appearing where Germans expected, only raiding parties. The psychological shock was immense. German soldiers fired at shadows, sometimes even at their own men, paralyzed by the sense that Allied troops were everywhere. On the ground, logistics told the same story. The 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, moved north from Toulouse. The march should have taken 3 days. It took 17. French resistance blew bridges, cut rails, ambushed convoys. Allied fighter bombers hunted every road. By the time Das Reich reached Normandy, they had lost 30% of their vehicles without ever firing a shot. The contrast was brutal. While German divisions crawled forward, bleeding strength, the Allies built a highway of steel across the channel. Landing ship tanks LSTs spilled entire armored regiments onto the sand in a single tide. Within days of D-Day, supply lines delivered 15,000 tons every day, more than the entire German army in Normandy consumed in a week. One side marched and starved. The other manufactured victory, unloading it piece by piece, ship by ship, onto the beaches of France. By June 12th, German losses reached 26,000. The elite 6th Fallschirmjäger
My
Regiment
unit
collapsed.
no longer
Its
exists
commander
as a
reporting,
combat
"My
formation.
unit no longer exists as a combat formation." On June 13th came Villers-Bocage. SS tank ace Michael Wittmann destroyed more than a dozen British vehicles in minutes. German propaganda hailed it as proof of invincibility. But Wittmann himself fell on August 8th, his Tiger shattered. Individual brilliance could not outweigh the arithmetic of attrition. June 26th saw Cherbourg fall. A fortress port, 4 years in the making, surrendered in 5 days. 21,000 men laid down their arms. Then, July 25th, Operation Cobra. 4,100 tons of bombs pulverized a narrow sector. Survivors staggered, broken. One German general admitted, "My division is annihilated. The men are no longer soldiers, just shattered humans." Finally, in August, the Falaise pocket closed. 10,000 Germans died. 50,000 were captured. More than 300 armored vehicles and 2,500 transports lay smoking in the valley. Roads were carpeted with wreckage. The German 7th Army ceased to exist as a fighting force. The mathematics of war were merciless. From June to August, German losses reached 320,000 men, 2,300 tanks, over 2,000 aircraft. The Allies? 29,000 casualties replaced daily. 4,000 tanks lost, replaced in weeks. 4,100 aircraft gone, drawn from a fleet of more than 13,000. One German general admitted, "Artillery 20-1, armor 10-1, in the air absolute." Back at WN 62, as evening fell, the arithmetic became human. Inside the bunker, shell casings piled waist-high. The MG-42's barrel bent with heat. Hands trembled around a crumpled letter. "We fired until the steel melted," one survivor recalled. And still, they came more. Always more. 13,500 rounds, a day's worth of defiance, and yet nothing against the endless tide that swept ashore. Courage and firepower dissolved in the face of industrial war. In that bunker, amid smoke and tears, the truth of Normandy was written not in strategy or ideology, but in steel, numbers, and the breaking of men. Normandy shattered illusions. It proved that modern war was not about courage alone, nor brilliance in tactics, but about the multiplication of industry, logistics, and control of the skies. The Allies manufactured victory on assembly lines, in shipyards, in endless convoys across the Atlantic. For America, it was the arsenal of democracy, made visible steel turned into ships, tanks, planes, and men flowing without end. For German soldiers who survived Omaha and Falaise, it was the death of belief that valor, tradition, or even genius could hold back an enemy who simply built more of everything. One side brought courage, the other brought production, and on the beaches of Normandy, the equation was solved forever. War had become industrial. Victory belonged to those who could sustain it. June 6th began with confidence in bunkers of concrete and steel. It ended with survivors staring at endless waves of men and machines, realizing that the tide was unstoppable. Normandy was not just a battlefield. It was the day the future of war was revealed.